Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The World Can Wait. We are excited to be here with another conversation for you guys. As you can see, I'm flying solo dolo tonight. My co host is not with me. He is down in Florida enjoying himself on vacation that he did not invite me to for whatever strange reason, but we won't get into that. Anyways, if you've been keeping up with us for the past week, then you know that tonight we are talking about our problem with women. Um, and I just want to say before I kind of kick things off, I had kind of a tough time finding guests for this week's episode. And the reasoning was pretty much the same. There was a few exceptions, but pretty much the same across the board. And that reason was I'm afraid that speaking out on this will somehow cause retribution at my job. I'm afraid that if my manager hears me talking about this, they're going to say something to me at work. They're going to do some of my schedule hours, blah, blah, whatever it may be. But I found that really troubling that the idea of talking about an issue that you face in society can bring back issues on you. Um, yeah, it's insane to me, and I guess I kind of get it as as a black man, just understanding issues that we face in the country and understanding how things can come back on us just for speaking out about it. But it's still, I guess I feel that women are so important to our society as a whole that it's kind of mind blowing that you wouldn't want to address these issues and not just not address the issues, but also oppose someone bringing them up and do something to someone for bringing them up. So that I just wanted to bring that up beforehand. It was a huge thing that I kind of saw across the board while looking for guests, and it was pretty troubling. But I also think it goes to show how important this conversation is. So what we really want to do for this conversation is talk about why we have the issue of women that we have. Clearly what we can see in society is that for whatever reason, we don't like women. Not the way we should, not always the way that we say we do. Um, Society proves otherwise, whether we're talking about things like the pink tax, whether we're talking about wage gaps at work, whether we're talking about gender roles or policing women's bodies, whatever it may be, society doesn't like women. And so we tonight kind of want to talk about why that is, ways that we've seen that, experienced that, and what we can do to try and change that for all of us. So before we kick things off, we're gonna do like we always do. I'm gonna open us up in a little prayer, and then we're gonna get right into it. Thank you, God, for this time. Thank you for the ability to have conversations like this. I ask that anyone that's viewing this conversation and all of us that are part of this conversation would leave with more knowledge than we came with and be able to go out and change the world. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, so to kick things off, since this might turn into kind of a deep conversation, which is perfect, it's what we need. But to start off on a lighter note, with a little icebreaker, I want to hear from all of us what is one thing that you admire about women? And whoever wants to kick it off, go for it. Well, hold on just a second. We can't hear you. I think that's an issue on my end. Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Let me get that fixed real quick. Okay, Rocks, try it again. No, still nothing. I'm telling you, I'm gonna blame Charles for this. He should have been here to help me out. That's what we're gonna go with.
Do the work.
There we are. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, we got you. We're out here doing numbers.
For the third time. I love the tenacity and sass that like women can have. And I think that it honestly comes from needing a way to put people in their place without directly like putting them in their place. And so having some sass and some spunk and like that tenacity to back it up. I love when I see that in other women because I'm like, oh, she's seen things. Like she knows how to handle this situation without even acting like it's a big deal. That's my favorite thing ever.
For me, I admire that women are extremely resilient throughout history. No matter what we face, we really just continue to try and push for ourselves and continue to be like, hey, we are people and we are strong, and we've never really sat down and taken it ever.
Yeah. Okay, who's next?
Okay, I'll go. So when I was thinking about this, the first thing that came to mind was, well, I mean, we all build the strength as soon as we get our bra strap snapped. And so I feel like I just admire women in for existing beyond that point. Because I feel like I don't know, that was just like really the signifier of when I knew that it when they put us a level below.
Hmm,
So
okay.
I admire women through that.
This is a really hard question for me too, because when I was thinking about this, kind of all the things that I was coming up with, I really felt were just things that I admire about humans.
Hmm,
Um, but I think probably I would say just the fact that women make an effort to like check in with each other. And if like I'm just thinking of a time when I was riding public transit by myself and I was in an unfamiliar city and I may have looked a little scared or a little nervous. And I had multiple women come up to me and say, like, I just want to make sure you're okay. I want to make sure there's nothing wrong. Is there anything I can help you with? And that's just something I really appreciate is that we see that in each other, like that nervousness or sometimes being scared and reach out to each other and help and support.
yeah, that was a good one because you're absolutely right. When you think about that, you see that a lot. And I'm not even that I think men need that as much, but you definitely don't see it there. Terrell, what about you?
So I'm gonna try and play it safe, and both retweet what has been said thus far, but maybe add just a little bit of a twist. Because I totally see what Jess is saying in terms of um, both the ways in which women often do that work, but also the kind of problem of the fact that women are frequently called on or just expected to do that kind of caretaking work. That caretaking, concern for others often ends up being women's work when it really should be people work. And at the same time, there's the kind of, if I'm going to state it with the worst kind of reference possible, the kind of 90s girl power sort of phenomenon of women breaking out of that role of exceeding in places that we would assume to be or historically have been men's places, whether it be sports, positions of authority, etc. But I guess the thing that I like most about women is the fact that they seem to occupy both of those spaces, both kind of saying everything that's good about caring and concern for others, but also asserting themselves where they see fit and expressing themselves.
Okay, I feel that. For me, I think I would really just kind of kitty piggyback off of Kitty. Um, Me and my wife have been watching A Handmaid's Tale recently. We just finished the first season, going to the second season, and what's so interesting about that show is it's like I would not be in the least bit surprised if that happened in real life tomorrow. Like it seems like it's something that could actually take place. And in watching that, you see the resilience and strength of all of these women pushing through this like insane situation and doing whatever they can to come out on top. But we actually also see that in real life. So I think for me, it's just that resilience, like Kitty said, no matter what gets thrown at you, just being able to push through no matter what. Jenny, you wanted to say something? I see you keep raising your hand.
Yeah, but then I like took it back because then you were like piggybacking on Kitty, and I don't know if Kitty was there for the discussion that we had in my chat the other day about how I used to recognize resilience constantly. You're resilient. Like I love seeing this resilience, and then I saw a tweet that was like, "Why do we have to be so resilient? Why does everyone keep calling us resilient? Yeah, but we're going through the things. You're seeing resilience because we've got so much on our plate. How about the things on our plate first?"
It was a sense of like, we were talking about how like, yeah, we like want to be like, we know that we're resilient and that we want to be known as being these resilient beings and having this ability, but also like we want people to recognize that we have been resilient and we've had to be so resilient because we've had so many challenges. We have been faced with so many challenges, and we want to be recognized for more than like, we just were resilient, but also like, hey, we went through all these struggles and we're causing you to be resilient. So like recognizing women for being resilient, but not expecting them like to be resilient.
Yes, not the expectation.
But I think even without necessarily challenges per se, but if you're even just talking about the amount of work expected from a woman versus like the amount of things on like a man's plate, it's completely different. I have the whole buffet, and my husband gets to choose like an entree and one or two sides. I have to handle the rest of it. And like, I'm not upset with him about that. It's more so like having to reevaluate consistently, like, why are we doing it this way? Because this is not working for me all the time. Sometimes it does, and it's great. And then when I'm overwhelmed or I'm not doing the things that like I have taken on, all of a sudden everything else is falling apart in the family. And it's just like, holy crap, there's so much that like I have to carry that nobody else is carrying. And it's crazy to me.
It kind of feels like in that situation, like it for me, it feels like there's a trend of like, it's just kind of how women were like raised through the centuries, and it stuck with us where we like saw responsibility, and if no one was taking it on, we took it on because like that thing needs to be taken care of. And then other people around us were kind of like, oh, she's taking care of it, she's got it, we don't need to worry about it. And that's how we kind of get loaded with all these responsibilities that, yeah, we took them on because they needed to be taken on, but we'd appreciate some help.
Yeah, and then it almost turns into this, well, I have to keep doing this because if I stop, no one else will. And no one ever kind of goes back to the beginning and thinks like, well, why did I think that I have to be the one to do this in the first place? Like, why is this my job? Or why can't this be our job? Right.
Right. Or if you stop, the reaction is just kind of not even like, who else is going to do this? But listen, my kid is about to literally break in here while we're having this discussion. But like, if you stop, then the question is like, why didn't you do this thing that wasn't even on my plate to begin with? I did it because nobody else was doing it. And now if I ever stop, then there's an issue that I have stopped doing it. Like, when did my volunteering become this giant expectation that I was just going to keep going forever?
It's like it's expected that once we're able to do something or we pick up doing something, we're going to continue doing it without any help, without any like encouragement or anything. We just, because we already started doing it, we're gonna we're gonna keep doing it. But we try so hard because we want to keep the things around us supported, and we don't want to give that thing up. So we do continue sometimes, and it's just such a terrible like thing on itself.
Sorry, I do that so that I remember, but then I needed to unmute myself. Maybe that's something that I admire about women, even though it sucks that we do it, because we keep the things from falling apart. Because Dom and Terrell, obviously, like, men have to adapt, and maybe you guys have found some more balance, but it's just interesting because what's the difference between this and then the people who don't? Like, why don't they? Like, why, like, why isn't it just a thought to do?
I think part of it is that there are certain people who just have always had the thing done for them their entire life. And it doesn't even dawn on them like, this is a thing that I would have to do if there was no one else around to do it for me. And I can think of some good examples of people I know who like literally lived with their parents until the day that they like, got married or moved in with a partner or whatever, and never learned how to cook and never realized that that was the type of thing that, is what keeps you alive, because they've just always had someone to do it for them. And I don't know if it's necessarily like a negative view of women. It's like, oh, it's a woman's job to cook. I think more of it is just like, well, I've always had someone to cook for me, so why wouldn't that just continue for the rest of my life?
Sons, all the sons.
Yeah. And also what Kitty said about how it's something that is kind of taught like through the ages. Um, even me, like with my wife, there was never like we never sat down and was like, okay, you're going to cook, you're going to clean, this and that. But it's just kind of what happens. And it is really easy to fall into that thing of, okay, this is what she does. And so if she doesn't do it now, then she'll just get to it whenever she gets to it. And that's fine, whatever. Um, but it wasn't until I started being a stay at home father when I realized, okay, this is stuff that I can also do. This is stuff that I now have to do. Um, and it's kind of the same thing. Like, if I don't do it, then it just doesn't get done. Now my wife works full time. She doesn't have the time to come home and do all the things that she used to do. But that doesn't mean they're not important. Doesn't mean that they don't need to get done anymore. But our roles have shifted, and now I have to do these things. And then you realize, these are things that I could have been doing all along. Yeah, like like whether they're like hard or not hard, it's like there was nothing stopping me from doing all of these things the same way that she does all these things. And so I really do think that it's like you were saying, it's just something that we get used to, whether it's something that we've seen modeled, something that we're taught, whatever it is, it's just we're used to it so much that we don't even think about what the other person has to go through and all the tasks that they've just kind of taken upon themselves. Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, and I
it
think
gets wild.
part of it is that I feel like certain roles are labeled as being like inherently male, like this is a male role and this is a female role. And I feel like the way we really should be looking at it is who is the best fit for this role, right? Like who's the best person to do this, who has the most time or the skills required to get this done. And
Space or mental capacity.
yeah, and also like if this person gets burnt out on their role and isn't capable to perform to the same level anymore, like it's okay for someone else to say, well, you know what, you've been doing that for a while, like let me take over and do it for you today.
And I think there's like a small problem with like people still being stuck in like primitive thinking, because like, yeah, back when we were animals living in the wild, women had to like stay and protect the kids, and generally they were pregnant a lot of times, so men had to go out and hunt and do all this stuff. But as we're getting into this new world where there's technology and houses and everything and women can work, it's like, well, women are able to balance out and join that world, and men need to like join our world, and it needs to become a mix instead of women just taking on more and more and more and more responsibility. Like now we're taking care of the children, doing all the cooking and holding up a job, and it's turning into this like this huge pile for us, and like the men are generally taking little bits off as they go, and it's like we need to balance the whole equation out as the world continues to go towards this new system.
When I think one of the things that I'm noticing, at least in like my own marriage, I would say straight up, my husband is amazing. He's an awesome dad, all the things. I do think that like he has this preconceived notion in his head that because right now I'm a stay-at-home mom, he'll come home sometimes and be like, but what have you, like, you have your whole day to yourself. You have your whole day free. And I'm like, wow, where did you get that? It doesn't exist. But even now in trying to switch the roles, like I'm trying to find a full-time job so that he's able to stay home next year. Hi, can you go back to so that he's able to stay home next year? And in that, even trying to convince people like I'm worth as much as he's getting paid. And then looking at jobs that are requiring a master's degree and still paying 10 to 15,000 less than what he's making as a teacher. And we know teachers aren't making crap right now. And it's just like, wow, how is this working out for everybody? Why is this acceptable? And then also like the amount of experience that I have in the interviews that I've had lately where people are just like, oh, but you've been just running your own businesses and you've been a mom for the last 8 years. Like you haven't worked a job in 8 years. And I'm just like, I have grown so much in the last 8 years. Why is this a penalty against me at this point? Like, do you want to know what I do every day? Do you want to know every skill I have? Because I have the capability to do whatever you ask me to do at this point.
Yeah, my time management and organizational skills have skyrocketed since being a stay-at-home parent. And yeah, you're right. There's no free time. I have a day off. Right, you want to say something though?
I mean, I feel like the way this conversation is going, a lot of really good things are coming up. I almost feel like men are getting off a little too easy because there's just so much, I agree that there's a lot of habituation that goes on where there are a number of things that even in a sort of partnership between a man and a woman, habits or attitudes just kind of get handed down or inherited in a particular kind of way. But even if we think about that sort of idea of women staying home with the kids while men go out and do the hunting, yeah, that was a thing that maybe took place in the caveman moment, but lions don't function that way. Women, lionesses, they do both the hunting and they take care of the cubs, right? Men are actually kind of crap as far as lions are concerned. And then, even in the 1950s, or for a good chunk of the 20th century, that was kind of the assumption. And that's one of the reasons why there is something like the wage gap, where two people could be doing the same job. One is a man, the other is a woman, and there's this weird gap in their pay. And yeah, no one is sitting behind the scenes sort of, pulling the strings and saying, I hate women, therefore I'm gonna pay them less. But there's so many things that we haven't kind of questioned. And I think part of it is because men at the end of the day are the ones who are benefiting from 90% of those positions of power. Men are the CEOs. Men are the presidents and chancellors of universities. So when you say pay women equally, at some point in time, when budgets come into question, that means somebody's probably taking a pay cut. And how many men are okay saying, yeah, I'll take that pay cut in the name of equality? It's easy to say, yeah, everybody's created equal. But then when it means that, oh, that's what my check's going to look like, that's a little bit harder.
We're not in that good old boys club.
And that's like, that's something I've said a lot before, is like people who are CEOs and people who like realize this like thing where like if you manipulate nice people and you do cruel things to nice people, you can get certain nice people to do things for you and take things for you. And a lot of men and a lot of people in power have manipulated this so that, the whole crowd now targets, like, a woman can't fight against a man in a whole army. Like it's being standing alone when they've manipulated this entire group into following this system. And it's like, we all want to get against the system, but there's a whole system to fight.
I got a question. Oh, go ahead, Jimmy.
I was just going to say that one of the things I had written down like beforehand that I think that maybe would add here a little bit would be that there's like a lack. So I'm discovering this in like the mental health world. So I'm just going to apply it and assume it similarly. There's a lack of research that is done by women, or, well, obviously there's a problem with women and there's a problem with the unfairness towards women in academia. So any type of research and studies is also probably being done majority by men. Or if there are more studies with women behind them, they're not being taken as whatever, the not literally, but like as valid, I guess. And so it can also perpetuate. I don't know if that makes sense, but I felt like that has to do with it, because otherwise the research wouldn't be digging into kind of how Terrell was saying, like, well, how did it get to this point? Well, we're not really the maybe the leaders in research aren't willing to even breach that.
I could definitely just speak to that really quickly. I mean, as someone who's trying to become an academic, women in gender studies, the minute somebody, even if you're in a different field, say like political science or philosophy or economics, even something a little bit more, you can call it harder or a hard science, the minute you say women in gender studies, people immediately think, okay, nah, that's soft, that's like very particular. It's not seen as the same rigor as someone doing a different type of study. So definitely don't take it seriously as far as the impacts it has on everybody else.
I will say, because I do work in clinical research, I'm a clinical researcher in an intensive care unit. So I work in critical care research. And my field, I would say, is about half and half at this point. And I've been in the field for 2.5 years, so I haven't been in the field very long. And I've been told by people who have been in the field longer that that's not how it used to be. And I'm also, I mean, I'm offering a Canadian perspective, so it might be different other places, but I definitely, it's something that I can see is getting better. And I think that like maybe, you know, in 50 years, like we might we might be in a place where we want to be. But I think certain fields are going to take longer to get to that point for whatever reason. Critical care is half and half. Human kinetics, like which is what my background is also about half and half. But I know that there's other fields like engineering or physics or whatever where it's nowhere near close to being equal yet.
Yeah. So my background, to give you some backstory, I did marketing for a gentleman's club for like 5 years. And I went from that into NFL and working for athletes and veteran players and all of that. And I feel like my resume is pretty stacked as far as like a marketing job or any kind of admin assistant job or anything like that. And especially in a small town, we live in a small town right now. And so to be able to say like, yeah, I've worked for this person, that person, this person, you know, all their names, and to still not get anything. And I made a TikTok video about it, probably a month or two ago, saying like, here's where I'm being penalized as like a mom who's speaking up and saying in my resume and in my interviews that I'm a mom. And why is it that all the things that are being counted against me are the same things that my husband's being praised for as a teacher? Because if he says he's a dad, it's like, oh, he's dependable, he's responsible, he's probably such a good guy. And like, as a mom, I was being told like, oh, you're probably like not dependable and super flaky, and you're not going to be hardworking, and your priorities are all messed up. And I was just like, whoa, this is not okay. And I made this TikTok video. And what surprised me about it was the amount of women that came at me saying like, I don't know where you're interviewing that they're saying this to you. Like, I've never experienced that. And I was like, right, you've been a teacher for 12 years. It's not the same in education because like women are doing the educating. I'm in like male dominated industries. And I'm telling you that this is happening. And women were like coming for my neck, like not all industries. I was just like, man, this is crazy. I never expected that. I thought I was going to get pushback from men being like, this isn't a thing and you're making this up and you're just whining. And it was largely women that were saying like, I don't know why, like questioning me, sending me messages. And I was just like, I don't understand why you can't hear that and then say like, oh, okay, that's actually probably a valid point. Like they were not for it.
So
I think also it can be really easy to fall into the trap of like, well, that's never happened to me, so obviously you're making it up. And I mean, I'll be like the first person to acknowledge that I come from a place of extreme privilege, right? Like I'm white, I grew up in Canada. I have parents who had, well, and still do have a very healthy relationship. And like honestly, for most of my childhood, I didn't realize that women like experience discrimination because it didn't exist in my household. Like it just wasn't a thing. And until I like got out in the real world, I didn't, you know, people would say like, oh, did you know women didn't used to have the right to vote? And I'm like, well, why not? Like, you know, or I would see that as like that was something that happened like 1,000 years ago, and we're way past that. And until I kind of like got out into the real world, I didn't realize that other people were having these wildly different experiences. But like just because that is not my experience doesn't make it not true. Right. And I think we need to be careful, like when someone comes out and says, like, this is my experience, this is what's happening to me, like we can't just immediately dismiss that as false. Like I think the first thing we should do is listen.
that makes sense. I mean, it seems like the easiest thing to do. Just listen to what someone has to say. um, Rox, and you talking about, you know, your resume and interviewing and how being a mom is like a negative thing. With the background and experience that you have, it kind of reminds me. Kitty was streaming earlier, and you were more so talking about women's bodies when you were talking about male intimidation. But I I wonder how much intimidation plays a role into things like that. Like, okay, let's say I have these years of management experience. I've worked in the NFL. I have all this. I know how to do all these things. I'm also a mom. I have experience on this front. Is that intimidating for a man in a position where, you know, like a hiring manager or a CEO or something like that, to look at that and say to themselves, maybe on a subconscious level, I'm scared of this person and what they can do. Let me not let them in. Like, do you feel like that's a thing?
So it's not the my experience was not essentially like they probably weren't like scared or intimidated by me, because they were just this person was kind of generally kind of sexist, and I just kind of learned that over the time working for him. But when I went for my interview, and I have been working in food service for years, I've been working in retail service for years. So I knew all this stuff. I'd worked many different positions and I'd done well at them all. And so I was like completely qualified to just be a waitress. Like it was just a simple waitress job. And I was completely qualified. And the thing I remember like so solidly from this interview is we were sitting there at the interview table and he was talking to me and he quote unquote goes, "You're a pretty girl. Guys will see you in here and come buy drinks." And literally my whole like body just kind of dropped in that moment because it was like, wow, not a single thing on my resume matters. I came in here and he's going to hire me if I'm cute. Like it kills you inside because it's like, wow, I'm not looked at as anything except a like advertisement for this business.
How many of y'all have heard that at work? Because I had. Yeah, like that's crazy. I would say I I don't I think that I think that men can be intimidated by the experience. I don't know that they're so much intimidated by me at all, until I hold them accountable. Then there's an issue. So like I'm like 5 foot nothing basically, and I literally have to tell people I run a nonprofit program in the summer, and I have to hire college interns every summer to work for me, and I have to ask the males that I hire, are you okay with taking direction from someone shorter than you? Because I've found that so very often, if someone can look down at you, they're going to treat you like you're younger than them or that you don't know as much as them because they literally physically look down on you. And so when I hold people accountable, I've seen myself have issues in that area where like women who tend to be taller or at least eye to eye with the guys aren't having that same issue because they're not like this little girl that's telling them what they need to be doing.
I feel like that actually tends to be just kind of a problem in like I don't know if it's included in like toxic masculinity, but that kind of seems to be a problem in like in confronting issues and dealing with a situation for men, because the amount of times I can like watch a show of like a reality TV show or something, or just watch a video, and like if a man gets angry, he'll literally like try to stand up and make himself taller compared to a woman and look intimidating to a woman, and it's like, oh, you're causing me issues. And it's like this kind of stance of like, you know, I can physically beat you, and it's like, wow, that is not anywhere near where we're at. You're getting intimidated by me because I'm saying something that is true and is affecting you, and you're trying to defend yourself by like just like, you know, literally being like, oh, I'm stronger than you, and that makes me better somehow.
So I just wanted to peep in really quickly with the, and I don't know if my brain got things jumbled, but this was I guess a thought worth sharing. At least from what I've noticed in the streaming world, and I don't know, so maybe if it's like a hiring manager who doesn't want to be replaced or something, I think that a woman's looks can absolutely be intimidating, because if that woman, even though women are more likely treated lower, if they are more attractive and that benefits them to that position, like if that hiring manager is like, well, I know that they're gonna like skyrocket past me just based on like how they look, not hire. I felt like I heard something in there but about looks, and that's what made me think of it. But
Yeah, and there's actually like connecting to that, there is like they did a actual study and like kind of evaluated like crimes that women committed and their sentencing and versus men also, and they actually found like, you know, women who are considered more attractive got punished less, like they got lighter punishments for what their crimes were, unless and only like there was a completely different, like there was one outlier that was so different that women got punished so much harder for sex crimes, because they were seen as using their abilities to commit crime, and because they were prettier and more attractive, they were punished harder for being good at this one crime which uses their attractiveness. But the crimes that didn't have to do with attractiveness, they were punished less hard when they were attractive. And it's such, that one blows my mind. That's incredible that like literally people's lives have been affected by their level of like attractiveness in criminal matters.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that
what's our prosecutor women to male ratio?
What?
Our like prosecutor ratio women to men?
I don't know, but I'm gonna bet not good.
Probably not. Probably not. But I mean, that kind of goes back to what we've been talking about men having these higher positions of authority and what pays the most. But yeah, what is it about women's attractiveness that creates such an issue for men?
I think it's like it is an issue of intimidation where like, so men want to like, it is just kind of a feeling of wanting to be more powerful and more in control, and that's kind of something that is a feeling that, you know, we kind of live by, and we kind of have to control ourselves, but has troubles with control. And so when we see a woman and she's using her attractiveness or something that, you know, men desire and men want to like obtain, and she's using it for her own power, I think that like seems intimidating to men, and goes, oh, this woman is not just like, oh, she wants me to be attractive, she's manipulating me, I'm getting used by this woman. And that probably makes men angry, versus when, you know, if there's crime and there's no attractiveness really used, they go, oh, she's pretty, she doesn't deserve to be in jail, stuff like that.
It's like you're expected to be pretty, but you're expected to not own the fact that you're pretty, and you're not expected to talk about it or acknowledge it. You have to be like, what, me? No, I'm not pretty, you know? And like, I feel like ever since I started noticing that as a trend, I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to own it. Like, you know, if I think I look hot today, like I'm going to say so. And definitely like there is some pushback with that. Like people are like, wait, you can't say that. But then when you say why not, like they can't give you a good reason, right? So
But also make it look effortless and don't take too long. Right? Like, yes, be attractive. We want to be able to look at you. Don't take too long getting ready. And also, like, don't let us know that you put on makeup.
it's the no makeup thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's like how like my no makeup takes like 30 minutes and it's like not effortless at all, but it's like, you know, it's like to give the world the illusion that I'm just rolled out of bed this way.
And it's like, oh, we don't care how attractive you feel. And we don't care if you're just like, you feel good about yourself. It's like, look pretty for us. We want you to look pretty for us and how we want you to look pretty. And it's like, if I do something that makes me feel good about my body and I'm like, wow, look at, I worked out and lost some weight or gained some abs. Look how amazing I feel. People will be like, wow, you're making that thoughty, thirsty pose. Like, how dare you? That's so gross. And it's like, no, I'm appreciating my body. I'm not trying to like, just like get a bunch of guys to come running to my yard.
God, if only I could tell you every like raunchy thing I've had a boss or a coworker say, we'd be here days. It would take at least a week.
The appreciating my body thing that Kitty said, I kind of want to touch on that because I feel like a lot of us are not encouraged to appreciate our bodies, or we're told, society thinks you should look this way, you should act this way. And I feel like I spent, the better part of my lifetime not appreciating my body. And just recently I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm like, you know what, this is the body that I have. This is the body that I have to live in for the rest of my life. And like, if I don't love it, I'm just making my own life more miserable. And for what purpose?
Did you hit 30 or you hit that mentality before 30?
I'm 27, so I'm getting there. But
well, congratulations. Because most of us, it takes like getting 30, mid 30 before we're like, yes, I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want with my body.
Maybe my mind hit 30 before my body did.
Congratulations.
So is it like a control thing? Because Kitty, you mentioned earlier the idea that if you're using your attractiveness or your body against me, then there's an issue. But then you also said, okay, we're going to hire you because you're going to bring in a lot of people because of your attractiveness. So you're going to boost my business. So is it like I know we mentioned intimidation, but it almost sounds like it's a control thing. Like
It's
as a
it's
man, I
definitely
should have control over your attractiveness, but you're not allowed to have control over it.
it's definitely that, because it's like, if we, so like sex workers, there's people who have to use their attractiveness and have to use their bodies to make a living and to live, and so they use their bodies and they do that, and that's their right. It is their body to do, and they can do whatever the hell they want with it. But when somebody else comes in and says, here's what I want you to do with your body, that's where it gets out of there. It's like, I want you to be attractive, do this to be attractive, and it's like, excuse me, I will do what I want to be attractive. I will use my body how I want. And so when it's people trying to like, demand what they want and control your body, that's where it's like that's where the problem comes in, because women can use their attractiveness if they want. It's their right to do that with their body, just like men can do that if they want.
I've always had like many more guy friends than female friends, and especially when I was working in the gentlemen's club. And one of the things that I always found really interesting was like, a stripper is a stripper is a stripper, right? They're there to make money, bottom line. And like, strippers literally have to pay to be there, just like a barber does, except the fees are crazy. And so the more money they're making, really the more money they're losing. And it takes all night to be able to leave there with some cash. And the amount of guy friends that I had that like would come into my club and then a couple of days later be like, yo, so how is that girl? Has she mentioned me? And I was like, you were her customer. She does not even know your name. And then all of a sudden they're so offended. And it's like, dude, I'm serious. Like, if she can remember your name, that's just good customer service. And she wants you to come back so that you have more cash in your pocket next time. But like, don't flatter yourself and think that like she wants to date you. She's making up. Leave her alone.
The amount of self-importance there is astounding.
it's kind of like, I think about like comparing it to like hiring someone to come clean your house. If you like offer like, hey, if you pay me, I'll come clean your house, and then you come clean their house, and then the next time they're like, hey, why don't you come clean my house? And you're like, how much you gonna pay me? And they're like, oh, well, don't you like doing it? Isn't that what you like to do? You did it last time. And it's like, no, it's like, last time I did it because I benefited from it and I didn't not want to do it. But now, it's like, if you're just asking me to do it for you, it's like, that's not what's going on here.
Or, and they would say this in any other context: if you're good at something, never do it for free. Like, no, she didn't ask for you because she wasn't on the clock. Like, I'm sorry, Rock, when you mentioned that, I just can't help but think of the Thanos meme. It's like, you didn't even mention me. I don't even know your name.
Wow, that's crazy though, because I feel like that goes to entitlement, and I mean that's kind of what we've been dancing around for a lot of this is entitlement. The fact that I can get mad at you for not bringing me up when you were just doing your job means that I feel entitled to you or your time or whatever. What would give me that sense of entitlement? Like, is that just like a man thing? Is that just what we've been taught through the ages? Like we're
Society.
men. We okay, so yeah, we're men. We get what we want. Like,
So there's a part of me that wants to say, maybe at a base level, what it is hurt feelings. And everybody can have hurt feelings, right? Like, oh, she didn't mention me, hurts my feelings.
yeah.
But men have been socialized to the point where hurt feelings now become a matter of principle. Like, how dare you hurt my feelings? Because I have a right to feel this way, and I have a right to expect you to make me feel this way. So, like, entitlement gets really, really tricky because, I mean, anybody could feel bad that, oh, so-and-so didn't mention me. But when you feel bad in that particular instance, and now you're making it, oh, a problem with them, that's where I think it gets weird.
I guess
But there's a
part
lot
of
of
oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh.
Oh, Jess.
Wait. This is so awkward. I'm so uncomfortable. Okay. I guess my question was going to be like, what makes anyone feel entitled to anything? Like, why do any of us feel entitled? Because I'm sure we all do. Like, if we can all think of it hard enough, like, I'm sure we all feel entitled to something. Like, I feel entitled to like basic respect when I'm interacting with strangers. But why do I feel that way? Right. And why do we feel like people we don't know owe us anything? And I don't want to say that it's just men, because I feel like most people do feel that way to a certain degree.
I feel like entitlement is kind of like it's been developed by society and supported by society, because when people are raised a certain way and they keep giving these things, they start to learn like, oh, I have the right to this. And because I've never had to, get any refusal to get it before, I should get it now. So like when men, are mean and demeaning to women and it works, they start to learn, oh, I have this right to women. I have this ability to get what I want from them. And so when they do get faced with, oh no, I'm not going to just give you what you want because you're a man, it's like, oh, why not? That's never happened before. And that's where like entitlement comes from, because they're like, oh, why not? Why don't I deserve this? And then they have to face that fact of, why don't people just innately deserve things?
So what do we do about this? Because the what we keep hearing is this is societal, this has been passed down to a point where it's almost innate in us, and it's something that individually you kind of got to fight against. But what do we do? And is there anything that women could or should do, or is it something that men have just got to take a hold of and change? Like what are the roles in making things better for the future?
I feel like men standing up helps, and men recognizing what's going on and having these conversations absolutely helps. I do think that like as a mother, I feel like my strongest way to help is to like raise my boys in a way that I see fit versus them seeing gender roles or them trying to learn the world from like just a male perspective. I will say like I I'm very much a person that likes to stand up for myself and to advocate for myself and for everybody else for that matter. But I have had so many situations in my life where, like, the one time you say no to a man, or the one time you hold him accountable, or the one time you say, like, this is the boundary and it's not okay, where like the switch flips and it's a whole different person. And that's really scary. And so I think that's where, like, they're all learning. That's a really scary place to be, and to have as a woman to know, like, I could be in a situation, but if I stand up for myself, there's a possibility he would actually kill me. Like, I've fired people and thought, like, this is going to come back. I have said no to bosses and thought, he's going to ruin me if he doesn't at least kill me. Like, guys can be really scary when that boundary is put up. And I think that a lot of men would literally tell you, like, that's business. And I was just being professional, or I was just, doing what a good businessman would do. And it's like, no, you were intimidating me. You were threatening me. You were gaslighting me. And you're saying you're a professional, but, like, I'm walking away literally scared for my life.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring a friend on this call because I felt like I wouldn't have a lot to speak on, because I think, Jess, you said similarly, like, you didn't really see a lot until you left. And I feel similar, / there's just other things that I look at because I don't know why I can't explain it. However, when Rox explained that, it reminded me of how only a few months ago I was actively battling to set boundaries that I had just learned. I was working with someone else who was an older man, I think like maybe in his 50s. And it got to the point where it was like, I was paid for these things, but the expectation got larger and larger and larger. And my ability to produce was getting less and less and less. And I was causing more and more and more problems. And it's like, well, but this is the pace. This is the pace. And then one day I had a bad day, and they were like, I understand. I get where you cut, like, I have all the mental health stuff too. I get it. And you had it, but we can't keep having these, because that's not how the industry, like, that doesn't keep things working. I'm like, and then I felt like, I felt like he again, like, kind of used the weight of his experience against me to be able to draw my own boundary, and how that will or will not affect my ability to be successful.
So, like, what I'm kind of hearing from, like, Jenny and Rox, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's like a constant feeling of, like, if a single woman, if just me alone, tries to face up against the problem and face the man, he's going to take the position of, I'm not wrong, you're wrong, and I can lord this over you. And then if you try to reach out to anyone, like, they're going to think you're wrong too. And it's this weird intimidation phase. And I think what's important in, like, actually, defeating this whole system and defeating this whole cycle is, like, we have to stand up for any situation where this happens. Like, it's so common where people will feel uncomfortable and see a situation and know, hey, that guy's being really weird and intimidating towards that woman, or this woman got really intimidated and is scared for her life from this man. And people just kind of go, well, move on, get past it, let's ignore it. And it's like, no, we can't ignore it. We need to notice it and say it and, like, acknowledge it, because somebody made a mistake and we need to fix those mistakes.
When I was working in retail, which I don't anymore, but I remember I had this interaction with, and this was like back when I was a teenager, and I still am a very small person. And I had this interaction with a customer who was much bigger than me, much louder than me, and was getting, more physically close to me than I would have liked, and kind of, like, kept moving towards me, and I kept backing up and was sort of backing me into a corner. And I think my manager sensed that I was getting a bit uncomfortable. And we had these like walkie-talkies that we use in a store to communicate. So whenever you're shopping in retail, just know that people talk about you like over these things. But she says to me in my ear, like, Jess, if you're uncomfortable, you can just walk away. And like, I didn't even think that that was an option in that scenario. And I kind of was like, oh, you're right. If I'm uncomfortable, I can just walk away. Like, no one is making me stay here. No one is making me have this interaction. I don't owe this person anything, even though I'm an employee and they're a customer. Like, if they're making me uncomfortable, I am allowed to just walk away. And I have my boss's permission to just walk away, you know? And it was just like, when that dawned on me, that was kind of like a shift for me. And I was like, well, like, if I'm ever uncomfortable, I can just walk away.
And that's like a huge thing too, is another reason like it's so hard for women to be able to stand up against this and like be against this, is because if we don't abide by our lady rules, we are no longer considered valid people. And it's like, if there's like this set of rules where women are polite and women listen to men and women do what men ask, and it's like, that's getting better over the centuries, but it's still this thing of like, if you had walked away from that gentleman without previous like acknowledgement, if you had just gotten away, I'm sure you would have had anxiety of like someone coming up and being like, why'd you leave that customer? Why didn't you deal with that situation? Because we feel responsible to be these like amenders and have these responsibilities, when it's like, no, we don't need to like actually abide by these things just because we're women. Like, it's like we have the right to like, you know, respect ourselves.
Yeah. And being uncomfortable is not part of your job, right? Like, you can't make the argument that like you have to stand there and be uncomfortable because that's part of the job, because that's not part of the job.
That phrase, if you're uncomfortable, you can just walk away, I feel like it's really powerful in a moment like that. But I find what's interesting about it is that I can also hear and have heard situations where a boss says it in the exact opposite context, where if you're uncomfortable, you could just walk away, as in walk away from the job. That there's not a requirement for, you know, you to feel a certain kind of way in this particular type of scenario. I mean, I'm even just sort of thinking about, you know, women who are bartenders and the type of crap, let me watch my language a little bit, that they will go through, and how there's probably an expectation from people in the industry that, yeah, I'm saying bartenders, this is the first thing coming to my mind, but I'm sure there are a number of different services where, you know, women go through a lot of harassment and other types of just crap from customers, and that there's just sort of an attitude of, you know, if you're uncomfortable, walk away from the job. And I know that there's two different contexts, two different sort of ways of thinking about it, but there's just like a definite assumption. I think a lot of people take it with things that, you know, deal with gender, but also other things.
Terrell, to your point really quick, I will say, between serving and bartending, I was always more comfortable behind the bar because there's a bar there and I've got all the bottles. Whereas like if I'm serving, they can grab me, they can touch me, they can push me. Like, there's much less protection in serving versus bartending. I do still think your example is very valid, but I will say the bar adds some cushion to the situation.
Necessary distance.
Yes.
That's interesting as well. Just the fact that a job will also kind of say, okay, this is the industry. You know, they're going to talk to you like this. They're going to treat you in ways that would make any normal person uncomfortable. But if you want this job, then you just have to deal with that, rather than, okay, we shouldn't be treating our employees like that. We shouldn't let customers come in here and treat our employees like that. It's like the shift is in the wrong direction. We're worried about the wrong thing, you know.
Can I tell you a funny story about that?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So in the club industry, I remember as I was like marketing and everything, my boss pulled me into the office one night and he's like, hey, one of the girls, you got to fire her. And I was like, why? He's like, every night she comes in here and she's wearing glitter and she's got all kinds of perfume on and blah. And he's like, you know, just stuff that rubs off. And I was like, she likes glitter and she wants to smell good for her customers. Like, what is the issue? I'm not getting rid of her. I'm not sending her home tonight. And he was like, no, she has to go. And you need to tell her if she wants to come back, she can't wear that stuff. And I was like, what is the deal? And he's like, because my married customers can't be going home with glitter smelling like other women. And I was like, well, if they're married, they deserve to go home with glitter and smelling like another woman. Like, I'm not covering that up. And he was like, this is your job. This is your job to cover this up. And I was like, no. That was not my job. But like, even the shift in that of like, it's our responsibility to make sure that your wife doesn't catch it. Wait, no, put that on me.
That's crazy.
Customer service versus employee loyalty. Like,
that's a whole other conversation right there. Oof.
I mean, that's what is coming down to almost. Though.
Yeah.
And when gender enters the equation, clearly the customer service element and customer service in this endpoint is, not let me put some like tablets for you to clean out the glitter or the smell, but let me get rid of and
a whole job, a whole person.
Like also just what if you didn't get the person with glitter and perfume on you, right? Like I'm assuming there are a number of people working that night, but then again, I guess it's like lactose intolerant. We
like telling a bartender like you need to serve non-alcoholic drinks because my customers can't go home drunk. Like doesn't make any sense.
Where they do that at?
Yeah, right.
And that's like a huge problem just like throughout like my entire female life is like obviously I think a lot of people know about this is like the responsibility of a woman to conserve herself so other people don't look at us sexually and stuff. And it was like I was literally in high school, I was like a freshman, like I was only like I think 14 years old when like my teacher pulled me aside and was like, you can't wear a spaghetti strap t-shirt in this 95-degree weather in Iowa because the people can see your shoulders, like you're showing too much of your shoulders, and they're like the teachers see you and the kids see you. And I'm like, one, the teachers shouldn't be like looking at my shoulders in any way, shape, form like that. And like two, like it's hot and like why am I being targeted for something that is like it's literally the comfort of wear, and you're telling me that other people are looking at me and judging me for it, and it's like you're telling me I need to fix it.
I think that's that control thing. My last job, I was working at Liberty at Christian College. I'm sure at this point everybody knows what Liberty is. Um, so I remember one day we had like a morning meeting or whatever. We had morning meetings every morning, and so we had our morning meeting, and then someone came to the front of the room and was like, "Okay, all the men go back to work." And we are like, "Okay." So like 10 to 15 minutes later, all of our female coworkers come back to work and they're all pissed. You can see all over their faces. Basically, they kept them in the room to let them know that they need to start dressing better. They need to start wearing looser fitting clothes. If they have big breasts, they have to wear this or that because they're causing all the men to stumble in the office. And basically, it's their responsibility to make sure that we do the job that we were hired to do rather than look at them all day. And it was wild because I remember who brought it up. I think it was you, Rox, with your TikTok. Yeah, it was women that were leading that meeting. So it was a bunch of women telling a bunch of other women that they need to do better about protecting and taking care of the men. And like I said, we went back to work. No one held a meeting with us. No one said, "Hey guys, you guys need to focus on your jobs. It looks like you're staring at women all day. They might be uncomfortable." We just went back to work. We had no responsibility in it at all. It was all put on them. And I really feel like that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier of a control thing. Like you can't use your looks on me. You only use them if I tell you to use them. You know what I'm saying?
And isn't it interesting that we can also be perceived to be using our looks on people when we're not? And that's like that's another huge thing. It's like asking women to cover up because they're so sexual is like, hey, if like you didn't think of me sexually, this wouldn't be a problem. Like I think I'm pretty sure if I went to a foreign country and it was just natural, like if I went to a nude beach in Europe, I wouldn't be like, wow, this is so distracting, this is so awful, everyone is naked and around me. I would be like, oh, this is the national standard, I'm walking on a nude beach, this is just how people are. And it's like, that is like, and the problem is when people have the mindset of, oh, all these people are trying to be sexual towards me, and it's like, wow, we don't realize that we're the people who are making the sexual problem because of our mindset, not because people are literally just walking around with their bodies.
Right. Yeah, Dom. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Terrell.
Just to touch real quick something you said about how women were the ones leading that meeting. And Rox, sort of something you were talking about earlier, when you talk about sort of looking for positions as an administrative assistant. It strikes me that something like an administrative assistant kind of almost demonstrates the way that people relate to that job. So even if it's an administrative assistant who's working in an office for a woman, there are ways in which they almost sort of use that, or it's treated as a lower position because it's associated as a job for women in a lot of different ways. And similarly, the way that women might take an opportunity to kind of assert or sort of perpetuate some of those same assumptions that, you know, sometimes a man can do it or a woman can do it in interesting ways. And clearly, I would say 9 times out of 10, it's probably a man who's pushing it, but the way that kind of practice can kind of sort of take place in that way. Just thinking about the ways I've seen in different circumstances, administrative assistants who happen to be women, even when working with other women, can still, you know, be kind of held to weird sort of gender expectations or be treated as lesser because of that. And just real quick, Kitty, if shoulders are distracting in a learning environment, there are other problems. Go ahead, Rox.
My caveat to what Kitty was saying, and then I'll answer you, was basically like, there are very few times where I've seen a man like with no shirt and been distracted. And when it has happened, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, never mind. Like, let me look somewhere else because I'm married. But like, I'm not mad that a guy has his shirt off, or I'm not saying like, oh, you really need to put a shirt on. Like, I could care less. I could absolutely care less. And then with what you were saying, so most of my roles with like NFL people was like executive assistant and personal assistant work. And I always found it funny that like they were getting all the praise, but I was running their lives. Right? Like no credit in that whatsoever. But then to become a mom and be like, oh, I'm just doing the same thing for little people now. Not translate.
Okay, y'all. We've been talking for an hour. This has been an amazing conversation. Definitely enlightening for me. I'm hoping that it was enlightening for our viewers as well. But before we close, we like to do something called final thoughts, which is where we give each of our guests 60 seconds to leave the viewers with one thing. So if they didn't hear anything else you said, what would you want them to take away from this conversation? Um, let's just go down the road. So let's start with Kitty.
So there is a problem in this world with women being undervalued and underappreciated and intimidated and used sometimes. And what we need to do to defend against that is make sure we are aware of ourselves, of other people around us. And when we see something we're uncomfortable with in regards to women and see something that we want to change, we need to step up if we can and make that change.
Okay, bet. Rox?
I would say I think that women are not helping the problem. So whether it be single women versus mothers in a working environment, right? Like or teachers in one industry versus whoever in a man dominated industry, or whether it's just women that are intimidated by other women and they're breaking them down, we're generally not helping ourselves. And I think that it makes the stigmas worse. When we need to be building each other up, we need to be having the conversations. We need to be doing our own unpacking to figure out why we feel the way we do about certain women around us. And really, like, I don't think that anything's going to change until we realize, like, the power that we have within all of us together, before the men kind of start to, like, see that, and instead of being intimidated by that, be inspired by that and say, like, okay, we want to back up this movement.
Okay. Terrell?
Have to start the timer. So thank you, Dom, for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. And when you did, a part of me knew that going into it, despite the fact that I've got a number of things to say, I've got a number of things to say about anything, I needed to be cautious of the need to sort of be quiet and listen, because lived experience counts for a lot, and that in a number of ways needs to take center stage for a good portion of the time. But at the same time, I think that that effort can be an excuse for men to just not engage. And so if I had to leave the viewers with anything, I would say, you know, for the men out there, you got sort of two roles. You got to shut up and listen, but you also need to stand up and say something. And navigating that is a challenge.
Okay. True, makes sense to me. Jenny, how about you?
Honestly, I'm struggling because I there's just so much and so many different pieces, and each of those pieces carry a lot of weight. Whether you take on the responsibility of seeing and saying something, or trying to say something for someone else, or to stand up for yourself, or to put that mental energy into yourself. There's a lot of work, but I'm glad that we're having this conversation. And so for those who are listening, I encourage you to find another conversation like this, or find more people to have this conversation with, more than anything else, I think. Because like Terrell said, the lived experience part, you don't know it until you hear it.
True. True that. Okay, Jess, how about you?
Oh my God, okay, I feel like it's a lot of pressure now you're coming to me after I've heard all these amazing things. But I guess my biggest takeaway would be that, like, your experiences aren't the world's experiences. And you know, just because you've never struggled with something personally doesn't mean that someone else hasn't. And it's really important to make sure that you're listening to people who have had different experiences with you. But at the same time, I do want to just acknowledge how far we've come. Like, I think about this all the time. Like, I'm a woman working in scientific research. 300 years ago I would have been burned as a witch. You know, and instead now I can do it as a job. And I think a lot of times we can get focused and bogged down on, like, oh, there's so far to go. And I think that we need to intersperse these moments of celebrating, like, how far we've come, because we have come really far. And if we only focus on the negative aspects of it, we kind of forget what we're working towards. And I think sometimes it's worth taking these positive aspects of, like, look how far we've come, look how many amazing things we've accomplished. Now let's take this momentum and let's bring it even further, you know, and let's not get complacent. Let's not stop here, but let's make sure that, you know, the next generation has it even better than we do now.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Um, for me, the thing that has stuck out to me the most during this conversation is control and this inflated self-importance that men seem to have. Um, Something that we've been talking about basically almost every conversation we've had is the idea of caring for the people around you and putting others before yourself. And I think that that kind of goes double in this, because we're talking about you trying to control a whole other person. because of their looks, their attractiveness, perceived roles. Um, and so for me, what I want everyone to leave with is to understand that the only person that you have control over is yourself. Um, that's super important to understand in all aspects, but especially in this aspect. Um, we should not be looking at women as tools or as means to an end or as something that we can possess to use to get something else. Um, that just seems to me to be a big issue in how men are treating women and how society is treating women. So my advice would be to do some self-reflecting. Um, take all the remarks that have come tonight, look for more conversations. Make sure you're standing up when you see things that you know are wrong. Don't just sit by and do nothing about it. I think as men, that's easy for us to do because you're looked at as something else if you're going against the flow, whether it's a beta male or whatever you want to call it, if you're going against what generally we're all doing. So all that is important, but also do self-reflecting because even when you think you've got it, you might not have it. Constantly examine yourself, see where you're doing things wrong, where you're thinking about things the wrong way. Hold yourself accountable as you hold everyone else accountable. Yeah, I want to thank all you guys for coming out here and being willing to have this conversation to talk about this issue. Like I said before, I think it's extremely important. So I'm very appreciative that you guys were willing to come out here and talk about it. All the viewers, thank you guys for commenting, interacting, and watching. I hope that you guys left with a little more information and knowledge than you had when you came here. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and close out on a prayer, and then we'll be out of here. Thank you, God, again for the ability to have this conversation. I thank you for how enlightening it was, and I ask that we wouldn't just hear this and go away, but actually retain it and utilize it as we move forward in society. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, guys. Again, thank you for stopping by and hanging out with us for the past hour. Really appreciate it. Stay tuned. We have more conversations coming for you. Make sure you're following us and your notifications are on so that you know what we have next and how you can be a part of it. And with that, I'm going to let you guys go. Have a good night.